Hello and welcome to lesson 4 of week 11. In this lesson we are going to create our class project and we are going to look at how to use an object relational mapper. We basically want to introduce SQLAlchemy. We review flags that we looked at in the last lesson and try to create two files, the app file and also a models file, from where we can create classes that will create our database tables. So for us to start, we want to navigate to the directory where we want our project to reside. Now for the class project, we are trying to create an antenatal reporting system, and within this system we want to have user's account created, where every time that user is pregnant we want to register the pregnancy and record all the activities around that pregnancy. We are going to look at different forms that we will use as our base to build the system. We are going to focus majorly on the back end. We might just create forms on the front end for us to see how to collect information and now process these forms on the back end. Now this is not a front end course, and so we will not be focusing on the front end side of things. We will just develop that off lesson and then use that to create the routes and the processing script for the information that we will collect. So in part 3 we are going to look in details at the requirements and what the form fields are for these forms, and we will use that to create our model. So for now we're going to try to create a database using SQLAlchemy and try to create sample tables, and then when we go along we'll delete this and then create the final one for the course. Now we said that Flask is a flexible Python framework that is based on the web server gateway interface, toolkit and Jinja 2 template engine. And for you to install Flask you need to have Python 3 installed. Now navigate to my desktop because that is where I want to create all my projects, and within this desktop I want to create a project. I'll use make directory and I want this to be called maternity records, like this. Now I'll cd maternity records, and now I'm in the directory where I want the project files to be. The first thing we want to do is to create a virtual environment, and it's always good to use virtual environments to hold all the binaries and libraries and interpreters that are needed to support the project, so that when we have several projects in our system we don't have conflict, and it's within this environment we are going to install Flask. And so we'll do that using Python 3-m venv, and then I will name my virtual environment.venv. You can name it anything you want. I just like using this convention. So once it's successfully created, we want to see that. I want to list. I'll use the A flag to be able to get all of the hidden files, because I have a dot in front of the name by default. If I just list, I'm not going to get any hidden file displayed. So I see that this has been created here, and we can now move on to installing Flask. Before we install Flask, we also all have to activate the environment. So on every new day when you come to your directory, you want to activate your virtual environment before you start anything. So the virtual environment name is .venv, and then /bin /activate. That's for Mac. For Windows users you do .venv, and I think it's /script /activate. Okay, so refer to the last lesson to see the command for Windows, and if you don't get it, research what command you use to activate the virtual environment in on a Windows system. If I do this, I might get a permission denied error because of I'm not an admin. So I would put a dot and a space before the command, and then I will get it activated. Once activated, you should have your virtual environment name in a pair of brackets before this, like this. So I'll clear so we can see properly, and here I will say pip install Flask, and it's installed successfully. I will say pip install upgrade pip. Successfully done. I'll do pip install SQLAlchemy. Successfully done. Now when we have this, we want to connect to the database. We sometimes want a database API that we want to use for our connection. Like I want to use PyMySQL, I can just install it. Pip install PyMySQL. So what we need to install are SQLAlchemy and PyMySQL, along with the flags that you have installed in this project. So we've done all of the installations that we need. So now what we need to do is to import that project here that we just created. Let's open this, and on the desktop we created a project called maternity record. In this maternity record, I want to create a file called app.py. I want to create a folder called models, and within the models folder I want to create a file called model. Now I want to use this models.py file to create the classes and the methods that create the database tables, and that is the idea behind ORM, to create a code representation of the database using classes and objects. So the SQLAlchemy, as we go along, we are going to look at the different functions or methods that it has. But before we go further, we need a database to connect to, and so we want to run a query. So we're going to go to your MySQL workbench or phpMyAdmin, whatever you use for yours. I'm going to start up my XAMPP server because I'm going to be using phpMyAdmin. If you're using my SQL workbench, start up your server. For this demonstration, I will be using phpMyAdmin. So once all this is started and the server is running now, I'll go to localhost /phpMyAdmin, and then my SQL tab here, I'm going to create database. So I'll say create database if not exist, and I want the name to be maternity records, and I want the char set to be character set to be UTF-8 MB4, and I want the collation to be UTF-8 MB4 Unicode CI. So I think this is how we write it, and then I will click on go, and if successful, it is created. So we have maternity records created here. So now we want to create tables within this maternity record database, and we'll be doing that from within our models file. So before we do this, let's go to our app file. Recall in the last lesson we looked at how to create a basic flags project, and we did our app file like this, from flags, import flags. Then we want to now import two functions from SQLAlchemy. The create engine function, which has different methods to connect to the database, to execute SQL statements, to run transactions and other things. And so we'll say from SQLAlchemy we want to import create engine, and let's also import text so that we'll use this to run our SQL queries in the form that we want. Okay, so we do this like this, and then let's put a connection string. Now the connection string has the syntax like this: the dialect plus the driver, because I want to use PyMySQL, the username and the password, at the host, then the colon, the port, / database name. MySQL plus, so it's going to be dialect, which is MySQL, plus PyMySQL. So if you are using another type of database, you are going to connect differently, and this is where you name your database, your dialect and your driver, if you want both of them. If you want it to just select any driver automatically, you don't need to put the plus PyMySQL. A colon, 2 / the username is root, the password, whatever your password is. If you don't have a password, you leave it blank. So my phpMyAdmin has no password, so I'll leave it blank, at localhost. And then because I have my default port of 3306, I don't need to specify it. If you are using my SQL on a different port, then you specify it here. Now the name of the database I want to connect to is maternity records. So once we have this connection string created, we want to see if this actually connects to the database like we want it to. We will say the engine now. is create engine connection string. So we are using this create engine function to specify the connection string to connect to the database. Recall that we looked at context manager where we want our files to close automatically and when we exit a code block. So we're going to use that to say with engine dot connect has connection, we want to do something. We want to say connection dot execute. Let's create a table within this database and we want this table name to be, so I'll say connection dot execute. And why I imported text is that I want to make it easier to just run SQL query by just writing the query within the parentheses of the text function. And I'm going to say create table if not exist, and I want this table name to be, for instance, patient. And in pair of parentheses for me to specify the column name and data type. I'll say ID, I want it to be integer, and I want a name column, and I want this name to be virtual, let's say virtual 200, and then I'll leave it at this. So let's just do this as a sample because we're not going to use this, we are still going to delete this. We just want to see if this connection works. If this connection string is correct, we are trying to look at how our app file, when run, connects to the database and run queries against the database. We're trying to do it as simple as possible. When we get to part 3, where we start developing for production, we're going to do this in a more secure way. So say results now is equal to connection.execute. What we want to do is let's select all from patient if this is done. But before we do this, let's insert records after we create this so that we can select all from patient. So let's say we have connection.execute, insert into patient, ID, name, columns, and want the value 1 John Doe. We can insert 2 records. Let's see, connection.execute, and then we have Jane Doe, and then the result will store a query that selects all from the patient, and we want to print out everything from that table. And then let's run this when we run the script. So we say if name equal to main, we want to say app equal to flags or name app.run. We can put debug equal to true. It can run anytime there's an update. So we've done this on our app file. What we want to do, what we are doing here is to try to establish a connection to the database table, to the database, and create a table and insert record into it to see if our connection works. And so when I run this, if all is well, we should not get any error message. We should get it. It's inserted, restarting, inserted, everything is well. We can go to the database now to see if we have tables there. Yeah, we have a new table called patient, and we want to select all from patient. We don't have anything inserted here. It's not inserted in the database. Let's say select all from patient, return an empty result set. Let's commit. So maybe we need to commit this to work. So when we do the commit, we come here because we know it uses transaction, and then because it's committed now, everything is inserted. So what we did not do for it, because the transaction is not committed, it doesn't insert in the database, but as we committed, it inserted. When we exit the code block, the context manager handles closing this connection automatically. And so we now have all of this inserted because now we've committed it and we have the records here. So it shows that our connection string works, everything is fine. This is not the way we're going to create our tables. This is just a test. So now that we've done this, let's just delete this from here. So I'm going to drop table patient, let's see, and we don't have that table anymore. So I'm going to delete this because this is not what we are going to use. Okay, so let's edit this file to work with the way we want it to work. So I'm not going to use this here, and I'm not going to be using this. So we import Flask, and then we import from SQLAlchemy, we import create engine and text. Now we are going to be creating this using our models. So we want to import the models. Recall that when we looked at the topic modules, we already know how to import. So we can say import, or we can say from models, which is the folder here, import models. That's the name of the file. Or we want to say from models.models import all. So we can import all of the classes and all of the functions that we have in that file. Okay, so we can say from models.model import all. Then now we can now do app is equal to Flask name. We also learned that for session management and to sign the session, we use app.secret key to make sure that it is unique and secret. So you now configure this app.secret key. So this will now prevent any kind of tampering with your session key. So whatever it is has to be a secret. So we'll just say some secret key, and then we want to now to the app.config. We have the SQLAlchemy database URI is equal to MySQL, the same pattern we use for our connection string that we have here. And it's just same thing to just copy the connection string that I have here and paste it here, which is exactly the same that I already have. So if it is what you want, then if it is the correct one, you just delete this. Okay, so we can also do the track modifications equal to false and any other thing we need to do there. You can read about it, you can research it for you to know what to do. So once we've done that, we want to connect to want to create the engine. So say engine is equal to create engine. I don't want to create engine this way, so I'll say create engine, and within this I'll say app.config, and I will use SQLAlchemy database URI, and then let me set echo equal to true. And when I set echo equal to true, this is just for debugging, for login, sorry. Okay, and then what I want to do now is to use base.metadata.create all engine. This is not going to work for now. I'm putting this so that the model we're going to create now is going to automatically create run all of the table and the classes once we have this code there. So let's create the models. So what I've done now is I imported the model that we have not created yet. We just created the directory, and I'm trying to use the create all to create all of the tables, to run all of the code on the models file and create all the tables in the database. So now let's go to the models file. We can create a route here if we want, but we are not doing anything with the interface or front end. We are dealing with the back end. So the models, now we want to import the different functions that we need. For SQLAlchemy, we need integer, string, foreign key, date, time, those different functions we need for us to be able to specify the data types that we want. So I'll say from SQLAlchemy, I want to import integer, I want to import string, I want to import foreign key, I want to import, let's import date time. Whatever I don't use, I'll delete later, but let's just try it now. Date time. I think for now, when we need anything, we will import it. Okay, then I want to also import the mapped column, then map and declarative base. I'm going to explain why I'm importing this from SQLAlchemy.orm import mapped column. We also want mapped and also declarative base. So there are many ways to do this. I'm just using this method for us to test, and then when we create our project finally in part 3, maybe in the next 2 weeks, we are going to explain in details our choices, where we make the choice, and we're going to make this more production ready. So I want to say from SQLAlchemy or .declarative, no, not ORM. I think this should be from SQLAlchemy.extension.declarative. Yeah, I think so. We're going to be importing declared attributes. Okay, so I'm thinking these are all the imports that we'll need. Let's import date time and type in optional. So let's say from date time import date time, and from typing import optional. So let's work with these imports for now. Whatever we need, we are going to import. So SQLAlchemy column object represents a column in a database table, and this in turn is represented by a table object. We have metadata that contains definitions of tables and associated objects, and these objects are like indexes and views and triggers and so on. So an object of a metadata class from SQLAlchemy metadata is a collection of table objects and their associated schema construct. Now we're going to do this like this. The first thing we want to do is to get the base class, which is going to inherit from the declarative base that we imported here. We're just going to make this easy. So we say class, we call how we create their classes and objects. Class base, we want to make this declarative base, and then let's just say pass. So just do it like this. And then we want to now create the base model. Class base model, there's the how to use decorators for us to be able to use like higher order functions. So I'm just going to do this, and when we get to part 3, we're going to understand the reason behind this. So the table name, so I'm creating the function, and I'm trying to make this base model to be something that all of the classes that holds the table definition just inherits. They just have like the base model for this creation. We're going to be mapping to the different columns from my SQL and SQLAlchemy to create that abstraction that we need. So now that we've done all of this, so what you need to have on your file is your import, then you have your base class that is inheriting from the declarative base, and then you have your base model created. You want to use the declared attribute decorator, and then we just create a function that we just want to create one basic method that applies to these classes to just make it easier for us to create all the models. Let's say we want to create a user table in the database. So we say class user. So I just name the class like the name of the table, and this is going to inherit from the base and the base model. Then what I want to do here is and then I'm going to name this table users like this. So you see why I use this here to just make it easy to use this to give it the name to our database table. So our table name is user. This is the name we need to see when we run this script. We want it to create a table called users. We want to define the table columns. Let's say ID is going to be, let's say, mapped to an integer. So it's int for Python, and then but this is going to be equal to mapped column integer. Let's say primary key is true, and then auto increment, let's set it to true also. Then let's create another column, username, and this is going to be map string, and we'll map it to a string. Let's say it is 50, and let's say unique is true. Let's make sure that the username is unique. We want to actually have password. Let's say map string 50. Now this is one table. We can create another table called, let's say, patient. It will also inherit from the base and the base model. We can now put the table name is patient, and then we have integer, first name, last name, age, things like that. So when we say this one is mapped column, let's say instead of age, let's put like date of birth, GOB. So let's say map column. This will not be int because we are mapping the date. So let's say mapped date time, and then we're mapping. So map column now will be date time, and we will have default. Let's default to now daytime now. So this is just a basic way. This is not going to be our models, but this is a basic way. We want to see how we can use our classes and our methods to create tables within the database. So now that we have our base here, we have the base model, we can uncomment this to have, because we imported everything from the model. So we have the base.metadata.create all, and then in the parentheses engine, this is going to run all the tables. There are commands we can use to create one table at a time, but since we always want to create all of these tables, we're going to do it like this. So I'll clear here, and if all is well, so let me open new terminal. So if all is well, and I come to my app and I run this file, I should get a user table and a patient table created in the database. So let's run this and see if everything is well. Sorry, I'm not running this, I'm running my app file. So let me come here, and we're running the app file here. So when I run, we have invalid syntax. Let's create a route here and see. I'm going to clear here. Okay, we want to see what the error is. From our code, doesn't seem to have any error. I guess maybe we have not activated the environment here for us to be able to use this. So recall that we activate our virtual environment using the venv/bin/activate for Mac users like this. Once this is activated, I'm hoping that this will correct the error we're having for us to be able to find this, because they're all installed in the virtual environment. So I've put a route actually for us to be able to see everything that will insert into the new table, the user table that is here. Nothing is inserted, we're just trying to create a table, but this is going to display whatever it is. Or instead of doing that, let's just say instead of that, we just want to echo something to the page. Let's say def return hello world. So we have a page that opens and then we see hello world, but when we go to the database, we just want these tables to be created when we run this script. So we want a table called user and a table called patient. And so when I run, let's go to the page and we have hello world here. Let's go back to this, refresh. We are connected to the maternity record database. We said it should create all here when we run the file. Let's run this models file to see. Sorry, we'll run this again, and then we'll come here to see if the tables are created. They're still not created, so let's close this. I'm going to interrupt this, clear, and let's run again. So now this is saying that it has created this successfully. So it's select database, created all of this, no key, and it committed this. So once this is committed, we should actually see the tables here, patient and user, created in the database. So this basically is everything. Whenever you have problems, just restart your studio, retrace your code if you sure your code is correct. That's how you debug. You saw from our error message there was nothing that was wrong. We had to reactivate our environment and we got this working. All right, so this is where we end this lesson, and these are not the tables we are going to be using. We are going to create proper table when we look at the project that we are creating. Thank you and see you in the next lesson.